Commoner saves the prince from a kidnapping. When he invites her to his royal castle, she recognizes the garden where she used to play before being sold by her own mother. Dawn broke over Boston, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets as Emily Miller made her way through the awakening city. Her thin cotton dress, patched in 3 places but meticulously clean, offered little protection against the early morning chill of 1767. At 22, Emily moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned to navigate the world alone. Her fingers instinctively touched the silver medallion hanging from her neck, the only possession she'd had since childhood, its mysterious initials worn smooth from years of anxious tracing. The medallion, like the recurring dreams of a garden she couldn't place, was a fragment of a past that remained stubbornly out of reach. "Morning flowers, fresh morning blooms," she called, her voice clear and steady, despite having been up since before sunrise to gather wildflowers from the meadows outside town. The marketplace was coming alive around her, fishmongers arranging their catches, bakers setting out fresh loaves, merchants preparing for a day of commerce in the bustling colonial port. Emily knew every corner of this market, every face, every routine. She also knew which faces belonged to Governor George Williams's informants, watching for signs of sedition as tensions with the French mounted along the western borders. "Miss Emily," a portly shopkeeper waved her over. "Got another letter needs reading. If you've time after your selling's done." Emily nodded discreetly. Her unusual literacy, learned by watching tutors through mansion windows and practicing with discarded newspapers, had become a valuable secret skill. For a few pennies, she read correspondence and documents for merchants who couldn't decipher the written word themselves. This clandestine service provided not only additional income, but access to information that flowed through Boston's commercial heart. "I'll come by midday, Mr. Townsend," she promised, tucking a strand of chestnut hair back under her worn cap. As the morning progressed, Emily sold most of her flowers. Wealthy merchants' wives purchased her carefully arranged bouquets, while she reserved single blooms for servants who might spare a penny for a touch of beauty in their harsh lives. She understood that economy well, the careful calculation of every farthing, the difference between eating and going hungry. By midday, Emily had finished reading 3 letters for Mr. Townsend and drafted responses at his direction. She was heading toward the baker's stall when she overheard 2 women in fine dresses speaking in hushed tones. "They say the French have spies even here in Boston," whispered the taller woman, adjusting her expensive bonnet. "Governor Williams has doubled the prince's guard." "Poor Alexander," sighed her companion. "First that hunting accident last month, and now confined to the estate like a prisoner." Emily kept her head down, but her ears sharp. Prince Alexander, the governor's second son, was known throughout the colony for his arrogance and charm in equal measure. Rumors about him were as common as tavern ale, but mentions of French spies were concerning. Governor Williams's tenuous relationship with the French colonies had been deteriorating for months. After selling her last flowers, Emily took her usual shortcut home through Oakwood Park. Dark clouds had gathered, promising an afternoon downpour. The park stood largely empty, a stretch of carefully maintained wilderness that served as a buffer between the merchant districts and the governor's expansive estate. The first fat raindrops were just beginning to fall when Emily heard something that made her freeze, a man's muffled shout, followed by the unmistakable sound of a struggle. Following the sounds, she crept behind a thick hedge, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the foliage, she glimpsed 5 men in what appeared to be colonial uniforms. But something was wrong. Their movements were too stiff, their accents when they muttered to each other subtly foreign. Between them, a blindfolded figure struggled against his bonds. Emily's breath caught in her throat, even disheveled and bound. There was no mistaking the fine clothing and distinctive profile of Prince Alexander. One of the men shifted, and Emily spotted something that confirmed her worst fears. Beneath the man's cuff, partially concealed, was a small embroidered fleur-de-lis. These weren't colonial soldiers. They were French agents disguised in stolen uniforms. Thunder rolled overhead as the rain intensified. The kidnappers began moving, dragging their royal captive toward the park's eastern edge, away from the governor's estate, and toward the harbor where a ship could be waiting. Emily's mind raced. She knew every inch of this park from years of passing through it. The eastern path forked ahead. One way led directly to the harbor. The other meandered through a marsh that would be treacherous in this rain, if she could somehow separate them or slow them down, without fully forming a plan. Emily circled through the underbrush to a point ahead of the group. The rain was now coming down in sheets, reducing visibility and muffling sound. Perfect cover for what she was about to attempt. Reaching the fork in the path, Emily quickly gathered fallen branches and arranged them to block the harbor route, making the marsh path appear to be the only clear option. Then she retreated into the dense foliage to watch. The kidnappers approached, cursing the weather. Just as Emily had hoped, they took the marsh path, not realizing they were being diverted from their intended route. She followed at a distance, watching as the muddy ground began to slow their progress. The men separated slightly as they sought firmer footing. This was her chance. Using the noise of the storm as cover, Emily circled ahead again and improvised a trip line with vines across a narrow section of the path. Then she found a heavy branch and waited. When the first two men stumbled over her trap, she swung the branch with all her strength, catching one squarely in the head. He went down without a sound. In the confusion that followed, Prince Alexander, seeming to sense an opportunity, threw himself sideways into his nearest captor, sending them both tumbling into the mud. The remaining kidnappers drew weapons, but the slick ground and poor visibility worked against them. Emily hurled stones to create further confusion, one striking a kidnapper's temple with unexpected accuracy. In the chaos, Alexander managed to free one hand and tear off his blindfold, making eye contact with Emily through the rain. He seemed to instantly understand she was trying to help. With a nod almost imperceptible, he launched himself at the final kidnapper, wrestling for the man's weapon. Emily circled behind them and, seizing her moment, brought a rock down hard on the kidnapper's head. He collapsed, and suddenly the forest clearing was still except for their heavy breathing and the relentless drumming of rain. "You!" Prince Alexander stared at her, blood mixing with rain on his face from a cut above his eye. "You saved my life." Emily stood frozen, rainwater streaming down her face, suddenly realizing the magnitude of what she'd just done, and the danger they were still in. "We need to move, Your Highness," she said urgently. "There could be more of them, and you're injured." Lightning flashed, illuminating the unconscious forms of the French agents scattered around them. In that electric moment, the unlikely pair locked eyes, a royal prince and a flower seller, neither yet comprehending how profoundly this rain-soaked encounter would change both their lives forever. "Can you walk?" Emily asked, quickly gathering the kidnappers' weapons and tossing them into the deepening marsh. Prince Alexander straightened himself, wincing as he tested his weight on his right leg. "It seems I cannot, at least not well," he admitted, his cultured accent a stark contrast to their muddy surroundings. "Those French bastards weren't gentle." Thunder crashed overhead as Emily weighed their limited options. The governor's mansion was too far for Alexander to hobble to in his condition, and returning through the city would draw dangerous attention. "My lodgings aren't far," she said finally. "It's not what you're accustomed to, Your Highness, but we can tend to your wounds and send word to your father's guards." Alexander looked at her skeptically, rainwater streaming down his aristocratic features. "And who exactly are you?" "Emily Miller. I sell flowers in the market." She offered no further explanation as she moved to support his weight. "We need to move quickly. These men may have accomplices searching for them." The prince hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Lead on, Miss Miller." Their progress through the storm-lashed park was painfully slow. Emily guided them through a labyrinth of lesser-known paths, avoiding the main thoroughfares where they might be spotted. Alexander leaned heavily against her small frame. His breathing labored. Blood seeped through his torn breeches where one of the kidnappers had slashed him. "The French are growing bolder," he muttered through gritted teeth as they paused beneath a large oak. Father suspected they might attempt something, but not this. Not an abduction. "They wore our uniforms," Emily observed. "How did they get so close to you?" Alexander's face darkened. "They intercepted my hunting party. They killed my guards." His voice caught. "Good men who've served my family for years." Emily nodded grimly, feeling a new weight to their situation. This wasn't merely an opportunistic kidnapping. It was a calculated act that could trigger open conflict between the colonies. After nearly an hour of arduous progress, they reached the back entrance to the dye works Emily guided Alexander up the narrow, creaking staircase to her attic room. The prince looked around with unconcealed surprise at the sparse quarters. A straw mattress in the corner, a small wooden table with one chair, a cracked basin for washing, and a trunk containing what few possessions she owned. "Sit here," she instructed, clearing the table of her meager breakfast remains. "I need to check if anyone followed us." While Alexander lowered himself into the chair, Emily slipped back down the stairs. She peeked through the windows of the dye works, confirming no suspicious figures lurked outside. The elderly dyer, Mr. Finch, had left for his sister's house for the weekend, a stroke of luck that meant she wouldn't have to explain her royal guest. When she returned upstairs, Alexander had removed his sodden coat and was examining the gash on his thigh. "It's deep," he said, a hint of concern breaching his composed facade. Emily retrieved a wooden box from beneath her bed. "I can clean and dress it. I learned herbcraft from an old woman who lived near the docks before she passed." The prince raised an eyebrow but didn't object as Emily set to work. She heated water over the small hearth, then carefully cleaned his wound with a mixture of boiled water and spirits. Alexander flinched but maintained his dignity, watching with interest as she prepared a poultice of crushed herbs. "Where did a flower girl learn to fight off kidnappers and tend wounds?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Emily kept her eyes on her work. "Boston streets aren't kind to orphans, Your Highness. You either learn useful skills or you don't survive. And reading. I noticed you have books hidden under your mattress." Emily's hands paused momentarily. "Some skills are best kept quiet," she said carefully. "Not everyone approves of educated women, especially not educated common women." Alexander studied her face as she applied the herbal mixture to his wound. "You're an unusual person, Miss Miller. And you're bleeding on my only chair, Your Highness," she replied without looking up to her surprise. The prince laughed, a warm, genuine sound at odds with his reputation for haughtiness. Fair enough, as she worked. The storm outside intensified. By the time Emily had bandaged Alexander's leg, cleaned the cut above his eye, and checked him for other injuries, night was falling. "We need to get word to your father," Emily said, washing blood from her hands in the basin. "I know some children who can carry messages without being noticed." Alexander shook his head. "Not yet. Those French agents knew my exact route today. They had colonial uniforms and passes. Someone at court is informing them." His jaw tightened. "If we send word now, whoever betrayed me will know I escaped. But your father will manage a few days without me," Alexander finished firmly. "I've been on hunting trips longer than this. We need to wait until I can determine who can be trusted." Emily looked doubtful. "You want to stay here, in my attic, unless you're planning to throw an injured prince out into a storm," he replied, the ghost of a smile playing at his lips. Emily sighed, resigning herself to the situation. "You can take the bed. I'll sleep on the floor." "Absolutely not. This is your home. I'll take the floor. With your injuries. Don't be ridiculous." Their argument was interrupted by Alexander's stomach growling audibly. The prince looked embarrassed, but Emily merely shook her head and retrieved a loaf of bread, cheese, and dried apple slices from her trunk. "It's not palace fare," she apologized, setting the simple meal between them. "It's perfect," Alexander said, surprising her again. He tore the bread carefully, offering her the larger portion. When she hesitated, he added, "I may be a prince, Miss Miller, but my mother taught me to respect those who show kindness." Something in his expression softened. "And you've shown extraordinary kindness today." They ate in silence, the humble meal shared between them creating an unexpected truce that transcended their vastly different stations. Over the next 2 days, their unlikely alliance developed further. Alexander's wound improved under Emily's care, but remained too tender for him to walk far. They passed the hours in conversation, cautious at first, then increasingly candid. Emily learned that beneath the prince's arrogant reputation lay a sharp mind genuinely concerned with the colony's welfare. Alexander discovered that the flower seller possessed not only courage and resourcefulness, but a perspective on Boston's people that no royal advisor could provide. By the third evening, Emily was reading aloud from one of her precious books, poems she'd purchased with saved pennies, when Alexander interrupted. "I've been unfair in my judgments," he said abruptly. "All my life, I've been taught that worth is determined by blood and title. Yet here you are, with neither. showing more nobility than many who claim the word. Emily closed the book. Nobility isn't in titles, Your Highness. It's in actions. Alexander, he corrected gently. After saving my life and sharing your home, I think you've earned the right to use my name. Their eyes met in the candlelight, the vast gulf between their worlds, momentarily bridged by 3 days of enforced proximity and growing mutual respect. The moment was broken by a distinctive pattern of knocks on the street door below. Emily's signal from her network of street children. The message she'd finally convinced Alexander to send had been answered. Your father's guards have come, she said, rising from her chair. It's time for you to return home. Alexander nodded, his expression unreadable as he prepared to reclaim his identity as a prince. But as Emily helped him to his feet, he made a decision that would change both their lives irrevocably. You're coming with me, he said firmly. To the palace. Don't be absurd. You saved my life at great personal risk. By royal custom, that makes you my protected charge. His tone left no room for argument. Pack your things, Emily Miller. The gates of William's mansion are about to open for you. Emily had never ridden in a carriage before. The plush velvet seats and gilded trim seemed absurdly decadent, compared to her life of walking Boston's muddy streets. The royal guards had been visibly shocked when Alexander insisted she accompany him, but none dared question the prince's command. They'll stare at me, Emily murmured, clutching her small bundle of possessions. She'd changed into her cleanest dress, but it remained pitifully plain next to Alexander's restored finery. The guards had brought him fresh clothing, and despite his injured leg, he once again looked every inch the colonial prince. Let them stare, Alexander replied, his voice regaining its aristocratic edge now that they were returning to his world. You'll be under my protection. The carriage wound through Boston's increasingly affluent neighborhoods until the buildings gave way to manicured landscapes. When they crested a final hill, Emily's breath caught in her throat. William's mansion sprawled before them, a vast colonial estate with classical columns, gleaming windows, and gardens that seemed to stretch for acres. Home, Alexander said, a curious mix of affection and constraint in his voice. Guards snapped to attention as their carriage passed through iron gates. Servants rushed forward, their faces showing relief at the prince's return, mixed with poorly concealed curiosity about his common companion. Alexander, a tall, elegant woman in an emerald silk gown, hurried down the marble steps. We've been beside ourselves with worry. Mother, he greeted her, accepting her embrace with the slight stiffness Emily had noticed whenever he spoke of his family. Lady Elizabeth Williams was still beautiful despite her years, her golden hair threaded with silver and her posture impeccable. Her relieved expression hardened slightly as her gaze shifted to Emily. And who might this be? This is Miss Emily Miller, Alexander said firmly. She saved my life when the French ambushed us. She fought off my attackers and tended my wounds. Elizabeth's perfectly arched eyebrows rose. A commoner girl fought off French agents. She did, Alexander confirmed, and I've made her my personal charge. Before his mother could respond, commotion erupted at the mansion's entrance. Governor George Williams emerged, flanked by advisors, his commanding presence immediately dominating the courtyard. My son returns, he proclaimed, his voice carrying across the grounds. Though his hair had grayed and lines marked his face, the governor retained the vigor of a much younger man. God has preserved our house once again. The formal homecoming continued with Alexander recounting his ordeal, carefully edited to protect Emily's literacy secret. While servants and nobles gathered to listen, Emily stood awkwardly to the side, acutely aware of the sidelong glances and whispers directed her way. This girl showed remarkable courage, the governor declared when Alexander finished. She shall be rewarded appropriately. Father, I've already promised her my protection, Alexander interjected. She will remain here. A flicker of something unreadable passed across Elizabeth's face. How generous of you, my son. Perhaps she might assist in the kitchens. No, mother, she's not a servant. The gardens, then, suggested a new voice, cold and melodious. Emily turned to see a striking young woman descending the staircase. Her golden hair was arranged in elaborate curls, her blue silk gown clearly imported from Europe at great expense. Even without introduction, Emily recognized Duchess Catherine Blackwood, Alexander's betrothed. After all, Catherine continued with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. If our brave flower girl has skills worth protecting, surely they would be best applied where she's most comfortable. Her gaze swept dismissively over Emily's worn dress. The South Gardens need additional help, I believe. Emily recognized the calculated insult wrapped in a seemingly practical suggestion. To her surprise, it was Alexander who tensed beside her while she remained calm. She'd weathered far worse from Boston's merchant wives. The gardens would suit me well. Your Grace, Emily answered smoothly. I'm grateful for any position in this magnificent home. Catherine's perfect smile faltered slightly at Emily's composure. Excellent, Governor Williams declared, oblivious to the undercurrents. It's settled then. The girl will assist Thompson in the South Gardens as thanks for her service to our family. As preparations were made for Emily's accommodation in the servants' wing, Catherine drew Alexander aside, though Emily couldn't hear their words. The possessive hand Catherine placed on Alexander's arm spoke volumes. A maid named Sarah showed Emily to a small but clean room, luxurious compared to her attic above the dye works. You've caused quite a stir, Sarah confided, helping Emily unpack her meager belongings. No one's ever seen Prince Alexander champion a commoner before. I only did what anyone would do, Emily replied. Sarah laughed. Trust me, most anyone would have run the other direction if they saw French agents with weapons. She lowered her voice. The Duchess isn't pleased, you know. She considers the prince her property already, though the wedding's not for months. Emily changed the subject. When do I start in the gardens? First thing tomorrow, Mr. Thompson is strict but fair. Been tending these grounds for 50 years, they say. After Sarah left, Emily stood at her small window, gazing out at her new surroundings. The servants' quarters offered a limited view, but she could see part of the estate's elaborate gardens, meticulously shaped hedges, stone pathways, and glimpses of colorful flower beds. Something about the scene tugged at her memory. Like a half-forgotten dream, the next morning, Emily rose with the sun, dressed in the simple uniform Sarah had provided, and reported to the garden shed where she was to meet the head gardener. The morning air was crisp, dew glistening on the manicured lawns as she walked the servant paths. You must be the girl, came a gruff voice as she approached the shed. The one who saved the prince. Mr. Thompson stood before her, his weathered face a map of deep lines earned through decades under the sun. His stooped shoulders and gnarled hands spoke of a lifetime of physical labor, but his eyes remained sharp and alert beneath bushy white brows. Yes, sir, Emily answered. Emily Miller. Thompson studied her with unusual intensity. Follow me. I'll show you the South Gardens. As they walked, Thompson explained her duties, weeding, pruning, watering the more delicate specimens. But Emily found herself increasingly distracted. Each turn through the estate's grounds felt strangely familiar, as though she'd walked these paths before. When they rounded a tall hedge and entered the South Garden, Emily stopped dead in her tracks. The perfect symmetry of the flower beds radiating from a central fountain, the distinctive marble cherubs pouring eternal water from stone urns, the unique arch of climbing roses framing the garden's southern entrance, the overwhelming scent of white roses in the morning sun. It was the garden from her dreams, exact in every detail. Emily stumbled, her vision swimming. I know this place. Thompson froze, his pruning shears suspended in midair as he turned to stare at her. His face had gone pale beneath his tan. What did you say, girl? This garden, Emily whispered, her hand instinctively finding the medallion hidden beneath her uniform. I've seen it before, in dreams. The old gardener's hands trembled as he set down his tools. He took a step closer, examining her face with disturbing intensity. It can't be, he murmured, almost to himself. After all these years, before Emily could question him, a bell rang from the main house, signaling the family's breakfast. Thompson seemed to recover himself, straightening his stooped shoulders. Get to work on the east beds, he instructed, his voice gruff once more. And keep your dreams to yourself if you want to last here. Girl. As he shuffled away, Emily remained rooted in place, her heart pounding. She turned slowly, taking in the garden that had haunted her sleep for as long as she could remember. The white roses, the marble pathway, the distinctive pattern of the hedgerows. In the distance, she caught a glimpse of Alexander walking with Catherine along a terrace. The Duchess's arm was possessively linked through his, her golden head tilted intimately toward him. Even from afar, Emily could see the rigidity in Alexander's posture. Two worlds, separated by stone walls and centuries of tradition. Yet here she stood in the garden of her dreams, drawn by fate or coincidence into the orbit of colonial royalty. As Emily finally moved toward the flower beds to begin her work, she couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't just entered the Williams estate. She had stepped into a mystery that had been waiting for her all her life. Emily spent her first week at Williams' mansion in a state of cautious observation. By day, she tended the gardens under Mr. Thompson's watchful eye, learning the estate's routines while stealing moments to explore. By night, she carefully documented her findings in a small journal purchased with her first wages. Thompson remained taciturn, barking orders but avoiding conversation, especially about her reaction to the garden. Yet Emily caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice. His weathered face troubled. One afternoon, while pruning roses near the tool shed, Emily overheard two older servants gossiping. "She's the spitting image of someone, I swear it," whispered a gray-haired cook. "Can't place who, but it's there in the eyes." "Hush," warned her companion. "Remember what happened to Mary for talking about such things." The conversation ended abruptly when they noticed Emily, but it confirmed her growing suspicion. Something about her presence disturbed the estate's oldest servants. On her 7th day, Emily was assigned to organize the garden records shed, a dusty outbuilding filled with decades of planting journals, soil records, and architectural drawings. Thompson claimed it needed reorganizing, but Emily suspected he wanted her away from prying eyes. "Start with the most recent and work backward," he instructed curtly. "Don't disturb anything older than 20 years. Those records are historical." His emphasis on the last word rang false, but Emily nodded obediently. The moment he left, she went straight for the oldest ledgers. Most contained mundane notations about plantings and harvests, but a leather-bound volume from 1749 caught her attention. Unlike the others, this one was locked, the small brass clasp requiring a key she didn't possess. She tucked it beneath a stack of seed catalogs to examine later. Through the shed's dusty window, Emily spotted a familiar figure walking alone along the garden path. Alexander moved with a slight limp, but had recovered remarkably from his injuries. She'd barely seen him since their arrival. A brief nod across the grounds, a distant glimpse at formal gatherings she helped prepare but never attended. To her surprise, he veered toward the garden shed. Emily hastily returned to her assigned task, her heart inexplicably racing. "Miss Miller," Alexander greeted as he ducked through the low doorway. "I hope you're finding your position satisfactory." "Your Highness," she curtsied, aware of the dirt smudging her hands. "The gardens are wonderful." Alexander glanced around the cramped shed. "Not much has changed here since I was a boy." Thompson guards his domain jealously. "He's been very instructive, but not forthcoming, I'd wager." Alexander's perceptive gaze met hers. "I've noticed he watches you oddly." Emily hesitated, then decided on honesty. "The South Garden seems familiar to me, though I've never been here before." When I mentioned it, Mr. Thompson reacted strangely. Alexander frowned. "Familiar how? Like something from a recurring dream." She touched her medallion unconsciously. "The fountain, the rose pattern, exactly as I've seen them in my sleep since childhood." "Curious," Alexander murmured, studying her face. "Have you learned anything in these records?" "Not yet. Most are locked away or—" She gestured at the disorganized stacks. "I see." He paused. "Walk with me, Miss Miller. The Duchess is occupied with dress fittings, and I find myself in need of conversation not centered on wedding preparations." Their stroll through the less frequented paths of the East Gardens drew curious glances from servants. But no one dared question the prince. Alexander asked about her adjustment to estate life, listening with genuine interest to her observations. "The servants have divided opinions about me," Emily admitted. "Some are kind, others resentful. Your mother's lady's maid seems particularly opposed to my presence. Mrs. Winters served my mother since before I was born," Alexander explained. "She guards the family's dignity as fiercely as Thompson guards these gardens. And the Duchess, she seems to guard you with similar dedication." Alexander's expression tightened. "Catherine and I have been promised since childhood, a beneficial alliance between our families. She takes our arrangement very seriously, and you don't, Emily asked, before she could stop herself. Instead of offense, Alexander showed a flash of the openness they'd shared in her attic. I understand my duty to this colony and my family. Personal preference has little bearing on matters of state. They reached a stone bench beneath a towering oak, hidden from the main house by ornamental shrubs. Alexander gestured for her to sit. You're the first person I've met who speaks to me as a man rather than a title, he said quietly, even before you knew who I was. Perhaps that's why you keep finding excuses to speak with me, Emily observed, though the Duchess might not appreciate it. Catherine doesn't appreciate anything that diverts attention from her plans. She's determined to be the colony's most influential woman. More influential than your mother. Alexander's laugh held little humor. You've identified the primary conflict in this household with remarkable speed. Miss Miller, my mother and future wife are engaged in a silent war for dominance that my father pretends not to notice. Emily considered this. And where do you stand in this war? Wherever duty requires, he answered, though something in his expression suggested resignation rather than conviction. Their conversation shifted to the political tensions with the French, Alexander explaining the complex alliances and territorial disputes. Emily's questions revealed her sharp mind and unusual knowledge of colonial politics, gleaned from years of reading merchants' correspondence. You understand these matters better than most of my advisors, Alexander remarked with surprise. Understanding doesn't require a title, only attention, Emily replied. The afternoon bells chimed, signaling time for Alexander's diplomatic appointments. I've kept you from your work too long, he said, rising reluctantly, but I've enjoyed our conversation immensely. As have I, Your Highness. Alexander, he corrected softly, at least when we're alone. After he departed, Emily returned to the garden shed, her mind replaying their conversation. Their worlds remained vastly different, yet something about Alexander called to her. Not his title or wealth, but the glimpses of the thoughtful man beneath the royal facade. That night, Emily waited until the servants' quarters fell silent before retrieving the locked journal she'd smuggled from the shed, using a hairpin borrowed from Sarah. She carefully worked the simple lock until it clicked open. Inside, she found not garden records but personal entries written in a delicate feminine hand. The first page bore a single name, Eleanor. Emily read by candlelight, her excitement growing. The journal described life at William's mansion from 1749 to 1750, written by a woman who'd arrived as a lady's maid, but whose observations seemed unusually perceptive about the family's private matters. One entry made her breath catch. May 12th, 1750. G. Visited my chamber again tonight. Such risk we take, yet I cannot deny him. Nor he me. Elizabeth suspects something. Her eyes follow me everywhere. If she knew the truth of who I am. The entry ended abruptly. Emily flipped forward, finding several pages torn out. The final entry, dated November 3rd, 1750, contained only one line. She is born. My perfect daughter. They cannot know she exists. Emily's hands trembled as she closed the journal. A secret child born at William's mansion in 1750. A mysterious maid named Eleanor who shared forbidden meetings with G. Possibly Governor George Williams himself. A soft knock at her door startled her. Emily quickly hid the journal beneath her mattress before opening the door to find Sarah. You're needed, Sarah whispered urgently. Thompson sent me, says it's important. Emily followed Sarah through darkened hallways to a servant entrance near the kitchens. Thompson waited there, his face grave in the lamplight. You asked about the south garden, he said without preamble. It's time you learned why it seems familiar. He held up a tarnished key. This opens the garden pavilion that's been locked for 17 years. Meet me there before dawn if you want answers. Before Emily could question him, he vanished into the shadows, leaving her with a decision that would irrevocably change her understanding of William's mansion, and perhaps her own past. Dawn was still an hour away when Emily slipped from her room. The mansion slumbered around her, only the occasional creak of settling wood breaking the silence. She navigated the servants' corridors by memory, her heart pounding against her ribs. Outside, mist clung to the grounds, transforming the familiar gardens into a ghostly landscape. Emily followed the path to the south garden, moving silently across the dew-damp grass. The pavilion stood at the garden's far edge, a small, elegant structure with classical columns and a domed roof. all but hidden by decades of climbing roses and ivy. Thompson was already waiting, a lantern casting long shadows across his weathered face. "You came?" he said, sounding both relieved and troubled. "You offered answers." The old gardener nodded grimly. 17 years I've kept silent, tending these gardens and their secrets." He inserted the tarnished key into the pavilion's lock. "But when you recognized this place from your dreams, when I saw that medallion around your neck," the lock turned with a rusty groan. Inside, dust sheets covered sparse furnishings. Thompson set his lantern on a small table, revealing a room preserved in time. A lady's writing desk, bookshelves, a rocking chair with faded cushions. This was her private sanctuary. Thompson said softly, "Eleanor's place of refuge." Emily traced her fingers along the desk's edge. "The woman from the journal." "So you found it?" Thompson didn't seem surprised. "Yes, Eleanor. She came to the mansion in 1749, supposedly as a new lady's maid from Virginia. But she wasn't really a maid, was she?" Thompson's gaze was sharp. "Clever girl, no, she wasn't." He moved to the bookshelf and pressed a hidden latch. A small compartment opened, revealing a leather-bound book much older than the garden journal. "This contains the truth, not just about Eleanor, but about you, Emily Miller." With trembling hands, Emily accepted the book. Opening it revealed not a journal, but a family chronicle, its pages filled with names, dates, and an elaborate family tree. At the top of the tree stood a name that made her gasp. "Williams? I don't understand." "Elizabeth Williams was born with a twin sister, Eleanor," Thompson explained, his voice low. "The day they were born, an old woman from the Pequot tribe who served as midwife uttered a prophecy. Twin daughters in the Williams line will divide this colony in blood and fire. The governor, their father, was a superstitious man. He couldn't bring himself to harm a child, but he feared the prophecy enough to separate them." Emily stared at the family tree. "He sent Eleanor away, to a convent in France, where she was raised as an orphan. She grew up knowing nothing of her true heritage, until the Mother Superior revealed the truth on her deathbed. Eleanor came to Boston to discover her family, and found herself the secret twin of the colony's first lady." Emily sank into the rocking chair, clutching the book. "So Eleanor came here disguised as a maid to be near her sister?" "Yes, but she never revealed herself to Elizabeth. Instead, she caught the eye of someone else." Thompson's expression darkened. "George Williams, the current governor, then merely the son and heir. They fell in love," Emily whispered, remembering the journal entries. "Desperately so, neither knowing they were committing the gravest sin. For George had been raised alongside Elizabeth, but knew nothing of her secret twin." Horror dawned on Emily. "You mean, Eleanor unwittingly fell in love with her brother-in-law, not knowing they were connected by marriage, and George, seeing only a beautiful, intelligent woman unlike any he'd met, pursued her despite his arranged marriage to Elizabeth." Emily felt sick. "And a child was born." Thompson nodded slowly. "A daughter, hidden from the world. When Eleanor finally discovered the connection, that the man she loved was married to her own twin sister, she was already with child. The shock nearly killed her, but she couldn't bring herself to terminate the pregnancy." "What happened to the baby?" Emily asked. Though she already suspected the answer, a cold certainty settling in her bones. "Eleanor kept her hidden in this pavilion for 5 years, with only myself and a trusted midwife knowing of her existence. The child played in this garden, never allowed beyond its walls." Thompson's voice cracked slightly. "She was a beautiful, clever little girl, with a smile that could break your heart." Emily clutched her medallion. "You Eleanor Williams, Eleanor's most precious possession." She placed it around her daughter's neck for protection, the night everything changed. "What happened?" Thompson's eyes closed briefly, as if the memory pained him physically. "Elizabeth discovered the truth. She found letters between George and Eleanor, learned of their affair, though not that they were connected by blood. In her rage, she ordered the child eliminated." Emily gasped. "Murdered. That was her intent, but Eleanor was warned by a sympathetic servant. She had no choice but to flee with her daughter. She arranged passage for the child with a merchant family leaving Boston, giving them a small fortune to raise her daughter as their own." "The Millers," Emily whispered. Thompson nodded. Eleanor intended to join her daughter once she gathered more resources, but she fell ill with fever after the separation. She died within weeks, her secret dying with her. He looked at Emily with glistening eyes. Until you walked into this garden, wearing her medallion, with her eyes staring back at me. Emily sat perfectly still, the impossible truth washing over her. I am the hidden daughter, the child of Eleanor and Governor Williams. She shook her head in disbelief. Does he know? Does anyone? The governor never knew Eleanor was pregnant, Elizabeth suspected, but believed the child died or disappeared with Eleanor. Only I and Martha Jenkins, the midwife, knew the truth of where you were sent. Why are you telling me this now, after all these years? Because fate has brought you back to where you began. Because I made a promise to your mother as she lay dying that if her daughter ever returned, I would tell her the truth. His voice lowered. And because I fear history is repeating itself in ways that could destroy you. Emily looked up sharply. What do you mean? I've seen how Prince Alexander looks at you, and you at him. Thompson's expression was grave. You're falling into the same trap that snared your mother. A forbidden love within these walls. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. Alexander is my half-brother. By birth. Yes, the governor's son with Elizabeth, and you as daughter with Eleanor. The implications crashed over Emily like ice water. Every conversation, every glance exchanged with Alexander took on a horrifying new dimension. The strange pull she felt toward him wasn't fate, but the cruelest joke of nature. Does Alexander suspect anything about me? She managed to ask. No, but others might. You favor Eleanor strongly, and some of the older servants have noticed. It's why Mrs. Winters watches you so closely. She was devoted to Elizabeth, and suspected Eleanor's secret child might someday return. Dawnlight began filtering through the pavilion windows. Their time was running short. What am I supposed to do with this knowledge? Emily demanded, sudden anger cutting through her shock. Why did you bring me here? Tell me this. If Alexander and I are... She couldn't finish the sentence. Because you deserve to know your true heritage, Thompson said gently. And because there may be more to this story than I know. Eleanor left other journals, pages she entrusted to Martha Jenkins for safekeeping. If you wish to understand everything, you must find Martha. Where is she? She lives on the outskirts of Boston, in a cottage by Willow Creek. Few visit her now. They call her a witch. Though she's merely a healer with knowledge most fear. Thompson pressed something else into Emily's hand. A small key. This opens a chest in Martha's possession. Eleanor said it contained truths that could heal or destroy the Williams legacy. Emily clutched the key, her world utterly transformed in the space of an hour. She was no longer Emily Miller, orphaned flower seller. She was the secret daughter of Eleanor Williams and Governor George Williams, the living embodiment of a forbidden love and a dangerous prophecy, and she was hopelessly drawn to a man who, if Thompson spoke true, was her own half-brother. The household will wake soon, Thompson warned, extinguishing his lantern. We must return before we're missed. As they slipped from the pavilion, locking its secrets once more behind them, Emily glanced back at the garden of her earliest memories, the garden of her dreams. Now she understood why it had called to her across time and distance. It was her first home, and the beginning of a mystery that was far from solved. For 3 days after Thompson's revelation, Emily moved through her duties like a ghost. Her hands worked mechanically among the flowers, while her mind grappled with her new reality. She was Emily Williams, not Miller, daughter of Eleanor, niece of Elizabeth, and half-sister to Alexander. The thought of Alexander sent waves of nausea through her. Each time she recalled their conversations, the growing warmth between them, she felt physically ill. Nature had played the cruelest joke. Drawing her romantically toward her own blood, she avoided the prince assiduously, ducking behind hedges when she spotted him approaching, volunteering for tasks in the farthest corners of the estate. If Alexander noticed her sudden absence, he gave no sign, occupied as he was with Catherine's increasingly elaborate wedding preparations. On the 4th evening, Sarah cornered Emily in the servants' hall. "You're avoiding something, or someone," her friend observed. "And you look terrible. Are you ill?" "I'm fine," Emily insisted. "Just adjusting to the work." Sarah wasn't fooled. This isn't about work. You've been like this since your dawn meeting with Thompson. At Emily's startled look, she added, Yes, I know about that. Not much happens in this house without the servants knowing. It's complicated, Emily conceded. Does it involve Prince Alexander? Because he's been asking where you've gone? Sarah lowered her voice. And the Duchess has noticed his interest. Emily felt a chill. What do you mean? Catherine cornered me yesterday, asking questions about you, where you came from, if you had family, why you were spending time alone with Alexander. Sarah's expression was grave. She's threatened by you, Emily. That's absurd. I'm just a gardener. You're a beautiful woman who captured the prince's attention. The Duchess doesn't care what title you hold. She only sees a rival. I'm no rival, Emily said with a bitter laugh. If only Sarah knew how impossible that truly was. Tell that to the Duchess. She and Lady Elizabeth have been in deep conversation these past 2 days. Whatever they're planning, it involves you. Emily thought of Martha Jenkins and the key Thompson had given her. She needed answers beyond what the old gardener knew, especially with Catherine and Elizabeth now allied against her. I need to visit someone in the city, she said. Could you cover my morning duties tomorrow? Sarah agreed. Though her eyes remained troubled, at dawn, Emily slipped away from the estate, making her way toward Willow Creek. Boston was awakening around her. Shopkeepers opening their stalls, fishermen hauling in their morning catch. For a moment, she ached for her old life's simplicity, when her greatest concern had been selling enough flowers to afford her next meal. Martha Jenkins' cottage stood apart from its neighbors, surrounded by herb gardens and protective willow trees. Smoke curled from its chimney. Despite the warm morning, carrying the pungent scent of medicinal herbs, Emily knocked tentatively. The door opened to reveal a woman whose age was impossible to determine. She might have been 60 or 80, her dark skin creased with countless lines. Yet her eyes remained bright and alert. I've been expecting you, Martha said simply, stepping aside. The garden girl who's really a Williams. Emily entered cautiously. The cottage's interior was neat but crowded with drying herbs, mysterious jars, and worn books. A large black cat watched her suspiciously from atop a cabinet. Thompson told you I was coming, Emily asked. Thompson didn't need to tell me anything. I helped bring you into this world, child. I knew you'd find your way back eventually. Martha gestured to a wooden chair. Sit. You look like you've seen ghosts. In a way, I have, Emily admitted. My own. Martha nodded, placing a steaming cup of herbal tea before her. You know about Eleanor then, and that George Williams is your father, and that Alexander is my half-brother, Emily added bitterly. A curious expression crossed Martha's weathered face. Is that what Thompson told you? Yes, that Eleanor and George had an affair not knowing they were connected by marriage. And I was the result. Emily clutched her medallion. That I'm the child of an unwitting sin. Martha made a sound that might have been a laugh. Thompson knows many secrets of William's mansion, but not all. He was devoted to Eleanor, but she kept certain truths even from him. She rose and moved to an old sea chest in the corner. You have the key. Emily produced Eleanor's key, watching as Martha opened the chest. Inside lay several journals, a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon, and a small wooden box. These are your mother's private papers, Martha explained. She entrusted them to me the night she sent you away, knowing Elizabeth would destroy anything left behind. Emily accepted the topmost journal with trembling hands. Unlike the garden journal, this one was filled with Eleanor's most private thoughts, beginning from her arrival in Boston, October 3rd, 1749. I have seen her at last. My twin, my mirror, my Elizabeth. She does not know me, but I would recognize her anywhere. How strange to watch her move through rooms, giving orders, completely unaware that her flesh and blood stands before her in servant's garb. Emily read passages aloud, piecing together her mother's story. Eleanor had indeed come to William's mansion disguised as a maid, hoping to secretly know the sister she'd been separated from at birth. She had not planned to fall in love with George Williams, her sister's husband. But as Emily continued reading, she discovered something Thompson hadn't known. George Williams had recognized something familiar in Eleanor from their first meeting, an inexplicable connection he couldn't identify. December 18th, 1749. G says there is something about me he cannot explain, that when we speak, he feels he has known me all his life. If only he knew how close to the truth he stands. I should end this dangerous game before it consumes us all. Yet I cannot tear myself away, as their affair deepened. Eleanor finally confessed her true identity to George. Far from being repulsed, he had been fascinated by the story of the separated twins, the prophecy, and Eleanor's journey to find her sister, February 3rd, 1750. G knows everything now. I feared his disgust, but instead find understanding. He tells me he married Elizabeth through family arrangement. Not love. The passion between us only grows stronger now that truth stands between us. Yet we must maintain absolute secrecy. Elizabeth would never forgive such betrayal. They knew they were connected by marriage, Emily asked, looking up from the journal. Thompson said it was unwitting, that they discovered the truth too late. Thompson assumed that because it was easier to accept, Martha explained. The truth is more complicated. They knew they were committing adultery, but believed their love transcended conventional morality. Emily continued reading, her heart pounding as she neared the entries about her own birth, October 15th, 1750. My time draws near. G has prepared the garden pavilion as my sanctuary. He cannot acknowledge our child publicly, but swears she will want for nothing. Elizabeth suspects something. Her coldness toward me grows daily. I fear what she might do if she discovers our secret. November 3rd, 1750. She is born, my perfect daughter. They cannot know she exists. The subsequent entries detailed Emily's early years, hidden in the pavilion with only Eleanor, Thompson, and Martha, knowing the truth. But then came the entry that made Emily's blood freeze. March 12th, 1752. Disaster upon disaster, G has fallen grievously ill. The physicians fear he may never recover his full strength, and now Elizabeth announces she is with child after years of believing herself barren. But how can this be? G has not shared her bed in nearly 2 years, since his heart turned to me. Elizabeth was carrying a child that couldn't be George's, Emily whispered, looking up at Martha. The old woman nodded. Now you begin to understand. Keep reading. March 20th, 1752. G has confided a terrible truth. The illness has left him unable to father children, perhaps permanently. Elizabeth's child cannot be his, yet he will claim it to avoid scandal, just as he cannot claim my sweet Emily. What cruel joke is this? My daughter, his true blood, must remain hidden, while another man's child will inherit the Williams legacy. Emily stared at the words, their implications slowly dawning on her. Alexander isn't George Williams's son. No child. The governor has only one biological child. You. Martha's eyes held ancient wisdom. Elizabeth, upon discovering her husband's affair with a maid, took comfort in the arms of another man, Colonel James Harrison, the governor's most trusted military advisor. Does Alexander know this? No one knows except Elizabeth, Harrison, and now you. The governor himself believes he fathered Alexander before his illness rendered him incapable. Emily leaned back, overwhelmed by this new revelation. So Alexander and I share no blood whatsoever, Martha confirmed. You are the governor's daughter with Eleanor. Alexander is Colonel Harrison's son with Elizabeth. Relief washed over Emily so powerfully it left her dizzy. The attraction she felt toward Alexander wasn't some perverse trick of nature. It was simply the connection between two souls drawn together by circumstance and chemistry. But her jubilation quickly faded as she realized the implications. If this became known, that Alexander isn't the rightful heir, it would destroy the Williams family and throw the colony into chaos. Martha finished grimly, which is why Elizabeth would do anything to keep these secrets buried, including eliminating anyone who might expose them. Like me, Emily whispered. I'm the living proof that undermines everything. Martha's expression was grave. Now, you understand why your mother sent you away, why Thompson kept silent all these years, and why you must be exceedingly careful about what you do with this knowledge. Emily gathered the journals, letters, and the small wooden box. What's in here? She asked, gesturing to the box. Open it, Martha urged. Inside lay a miniature portrait of a strikingly beautiful woman with Emily's eyes and the unmistakable aristocratic features of the Williams family. Beside it was a folded document bearing the governor's seal, a legal acknowledgement of your birth. Signed by your father but never filed, Martha explained. Eleanor made him create it as insurance, though she never intended to use it unless absolutely necessary. Emily closed the box carefully. I need to return to the mansion before my absence is noticed. Martha caught her arm. Be vigilant. Child, the Duchess suspects something, even if she doesn't know what. And Elizabeth, her voice dropped. Elizabeth would rather see you dead than have her perfect world disrupted. As Emily left the cottage, her mind raced with all she had learned. She was the governor's only biological child. Alexander was not her brother, and somewhere in William's mansion, two dangerous women were conspiring against her. The path forward remained perilous, but at least one burden had been lifted. The love she felt growing for Alexander was not forbidden by nature, only by the tangled web of secrets that surrounded them both. Emily returned to William's mansion with Eleanor's journals and documents hidden beneath her cloak, though the revelation that she and Alexander shared no blood had lifted an immense weight. New dangers loomed. If Elizabeth discovered Emily's identity, or worse, if Catherine learned of Emily's growing feelings for Alexander, her position would become untenable. She needed a safe hiding place for her mother's papers. The servants' quarters offered too little privacy, and Thompson's shed was frequently accessed by other gardeners. After careful consideration, Emily returned to the pavilion at dusk, using the key Thompson had provided in the fading light. She located a loose floorboard beneath the writing desk and carefully concealed the precious items. So you've returned to your birthplace, came Thompson's voice from the doorway, startling her. You knew, Emily asked, recovering her composure, about Alexander not being the governor's son. Thompson's weathered face registered surprise. So Martha told you, I suspected, but never knew for certain. He entered, carefully closing the door behind him. Elizabeth was never faithful to the governor, not after she discovered his affection for Eleanor. Why did you let me believe Alexander was my half-brother? Because that's what I believed until Elizabeth's confessor let something slip years ago. I hoped Martha might know the truth. He studied her face. Does it change your feelings? Emily looked away. I don't know what you mean. You're as poor at deception as your mother was. Thompson sighed. I've seen how you look at him, and he at you. It doesn't matter. He's betrothed to Catherine, and I'm just a gardener. Your mother was just a maid, yet she captured the governor's heart. Thompson's tone was gentle. Be careful, Emily. History has a way of repeating itself in this house. The next morning, Emily was summoned to the main house, a rare occurrence for a garden worker. Sarah helped her change into her cleanest uniform. Her expression worried. The governor's study, Sarah whispered. It must be important. Emily's heart pounded as she was escorted through the mansion's opulent corridors. Had someone discovered her secret? Was this confrontation or revelation? To her surprise, she found not just the governor waiting, but Alexander and Catherine as well. The Duchess looked especially displeased at Emily's presence. Miss Miller, Governor Williams greeted her, his voice warm but formal. My son has requested your assistance with a special project. Alexander stepped forward. The French ambassador visits next week. I recalled your knowledge of garden flowers and their meanings, something you mentioned during my recovery. He carefully avoided referencing his time in her attic. We thought you might advise on floral arrangements that convey peaceful intentions without appearing weak. Catherine's smile was razor thin. Alexander insisted your expertise was unique. Emily curtsied, keeping her eyes lowered to hide her confusion. Alexander had never shown interest in floral meanings during their conversations. I'd be honored to help, Your Highness. Excellent, the governor declared. You'll work with Alexander and the Duchess this afternoon. Thompson has already been informed of your reassignment. As they left the study, Catherine glided ahead with a stiff back, leaving Emily momentarily alone with Alexander. What is this really about? She whispered. You've never cared about flower meanings. Alexander's eyes darted ahead to ensure Catherine was out of earshot. It was the only way I could think to speak with you. You've been avoiding me. I've been busy with my duties. Duties that somehow keep you in the farthest corners of the estate whenever I approach. His expression softened. Have I offended you in some way? Before Emily could respond, Catherine turned back. Are you coming, Alexander? Lady Elizabeth is expecting us for the menu tasting. We'll continue this discussion during our project, Alexander murmured, then raised his voice. Of course, my dear Miss Miller. Please join us in the East Salon at 2:00. Emily spent the intervening hours in nervous anticipation. What did Alexander want to discuss so urgently that he'd invented a diplomatic project? And how could she face him now, knowing what she did about their true connection? The East Salon, bathed in afternoon sunlight, was one of the mansion's most elegant rooms. Emily arrived precisely at 2 to find Alexander alone, arranging papers on a table near the windows. "The Duchess won't be joining us?" she asked, remaining near the door. Catherine had a sudden headache. Alexander's tone suggested this was convenient rather than concerning. "Please sit." Emily perched cautiously on the edge of a chair, maintaining formal distance. "Your Highness? I'm not sure this is appropriate." "Appropriate?" Alexander looked genuinely confused. "We're discussing floral arrangements for a diplomatic event. Is that what we're really discussing?" Alexander abandoned the pretense, his shoulders relaxing as he took the seat across from her. "No, I wanted to understand why you've been avoiding me. We were friends once, or at least, I thought we were becoming friends." The earnestness in his expression made Emily's resolve waver. "Much has changed since I tended your wounds in my attic. Yes, you've gone from a flower seller to a royal gardener. I've recovered from my injuries. But why should that change what exists between us?" "What exactly exists between us, Your Highness?" Emily asked carefully. Alexander held her gaze. "A connection I've never experienced with anyone else. An understanding that transcends our different stations. And," he hesitated, then continued more softly, "something I cannot name but feel whenever we speak." Emily's heart raced. The truth burned on her tongue, that she was the governor's daughter, that Alexander wasn't his son, that they were free to explore the connection between them. But Martha's warning echoed in her mind. Such revelations could destroy the entire Williams legacy. "Your wedding approaches," she reminded him gently. "Your duty is to Catherine and the colony." "Duty," Alexander repeated bitterly. "Always duty. But what of happiness? What of choosing one's own path? Such luxuries aren't meant for princes," Emily said. Echoing the reality they both understood, their conversation was interrupted by a servant announcing Lady Elizabeth's arrival. Emily quickly gathered the blank papers, pretending to discuss flower arrangements as Elizabeth entered with Catherine at her side. "Working diligently, I see," Elizabeth observed, her keen eyes noting the tension in the room. "Catherine, dear, I thought you were resting with a headache." "I recovered remarkably quickly," Catherine replied sweetly, though her eyes remained cold as she assessed Emily. "I couldn't leave Alexander alone with such important diplomatic decisions." The implication was clear. Emily excused herself as soon as politeness allowed, feeling Catherine's suspicious gaze following her from the room. Later that evening, as Emily pruned roses in the fading light, she heard footsteps approaching, too heavy for Thompson, too determined for a casual gardener. She turned to find Colonel James Harrison watching her from the garden path. The colonel was a striking figure, tall and broad-shouldered despite his 50 years. With shrewd eyes and the bearing of a man accustomed to command, Emily had seen him occasionally at formal events, but never spoken to him directly. "Miss Miller," he greeted her. "May I have a word?" Emily set down her pruning shears, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. "Of course, Colonel. I understand you've been spending time with Prince Alexander," Harrison began, his tone neutral but his eyes assessing. "The Duchess seems concerned about the nature of your conversations." Emily maintained a calm facade despite her racing heart. "His Highness requested my assistance with floral arrangements for the French ambassador." "Indeed." Harrison's expression remained unreadable. "A curious assignment for a garden worker. Wouldn't you agree?" "I simply follow orders, sir." Harrison stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You have her eyes." "You know." Emily froze. "Sir." Eleanor's eyes, I knew her briefly during her time here. His gaze flicked to her medallion, partially visible at her collar. That was hers as well, if I'm not mistaken. Blood rushed in Emily's ears. Did Harrison know? Was he an enemy or ally? "I don't know what you mean," she managed. "I think you do." Harrison's voice remained level. "There are whispers in the house about you, the timing of your arrival, your unusual connection with the prince, your resemblance to someone long forgotten." He paused. "Elizabeth has noticed these things as well." Emily felt cold despite the warm evening. "What does Lady Elizabeth intend to do?" "That depends on you, Miss Miller." Harrison studied her face. You possess secrets that could destroy this household. The question is whether you intend to use them. I want no destruction, Emily said honestly. I seek only truth. Truth is rarely kind in matters of power and succession. Harrison glanced toward the mansion. Be careful where you search for it, and with whom you share it. As the colonel walked away, Emily remained rooted in place, her mind racing. Harrison knew, or at least suspected, her true identity. Did he also know she had discovered his secret paternity of Alexander? The intricate web of secrets surrounding William's mansion had grown even more tangled. That night, Emily slipped out to the garden pavilion once more. She needed to review Eleanor's journals again, to search for any mention of Harrison, and understand the full complexity of the relationships she'd been born into. As she approached the pavilion, a flicker of light from within made her freeze. Someone was already there, rifling through her mother's hidden legacy, and with it, the proof of Emily's rightful place in the Williams family. Emily crouched behind a thicket of roses, her heart hammering as she watched the flickering lantern light through the pavilion windows. Whoever was inside moved purposefully. Searching systematically through drawers and cabinets, Emily slipped closer, staying in the shadows. Through a gap in the curtains, she glimpsed Mrs. Winters, Elizabeth's loyal lady's maid, methodically examining the pavilion's contents. The loose floorboard remained undisturbed, but for how long, as Mrs. Winters approached the writing desk, Emily made a desperate decision. Grabbing a rock from the garden path, she hurled it into the distant shrubbery. The sudden crash startled the maid, who quickly extinguished her lantern and peered out nervously. Emily circled around, deliberately rustling branches as she moved away from the pavilion. Mrs. Winters emerged cautiously, then hurried toward the mansion, throwing fearful glances over her shoulder. Once certain the woman was gone, Emily slipped inside, working by touch in the darkness. She retrieved Eleanor's journals and the wooden box containing her birth document. These secrets were no longer safe here. Looking for something. Thompson's voice came from the doorway, nearly stopping her heart. You scared me half to death, Emily whispered fiercely. Better me than Mrs. Winters. Thompson entered, closing the door behind him. Elizabeth has set her spies searching. Something has made her suspicious. Colonel Harrison spoke to me today. He recognized my resemblance to Eleanor. Thompson cursed under his breath. The colonel knows more than most about the Williams family secrets. If he's involved now, the old gardener looked grim. You need a safer hiding place. Where? The servants' quarters are too public. Not where. Who? Thompson's weathered face creased in thought. The governor's birthday ball is in 3 days. Every servant will be occupied. Every noble in attendance. It's your opportunity to speak with Governor Williams privately. Emily stared at him. You can't be serious. He doesn't even know I exist. Precisely why you must tell him, if Elizabeth and Catherine are moving against you. Your only protection is the truth, and your father's recognition. He'll never believe me. He will if you show him Eleanor's journals, and the birth document bearing his own seal. Thompson took her hands. Your mother always intended for you to claim your birthright when the time was right. Perhaps that time has come. As dawn approached, they formulated a plan. Emily would serve as an attendant at the ball, positioning herself to intercept the governor during a quiet moment. Thompson would create a diversion if necessary. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. The entire mansion was transformed for the governor's 60th birthday celebration. Fresh-cut flowers adorned every surface. Imported delicacies filled the kitchens, and musicians practiced in the ballroom. Emily was assigned to help with floral arrangements, which gave her legitimate reason to move throughout the mansion. She kept Eleanor's documents hidden in a hollowed-out gardening manual in Thompson's quarters. Waiting for the right moment, the day of the ball arrived with perfect autumn weather. Emily spent the morning arranging centerpieces, then was reassigned to assist with guest preparations. To her alarm, she was directed to the Duchess's chambers. Catherine sat at her vanity while her maids arranged her elaborate golden curls. Her ball gown, a confection of blue silk and French lace, was laid across a chaise lounge. Ah, Miss Miller, Catherine smiled with practiced charm. How convenient. I needed someone to press the ribbons for my hair. Emily curtsied and set to work, keeping her eyes lowered while Catherine continued preparations. The Duchess dismissed her other maids, leaving them alone as Emily carefully pressed the silk ribbons with a heated iron. You know, Catherine said conversationally, I've been puzzled by Alexander's interest in you. At first, I thought it mere novelty. A prince distracted by a pretty commoner who saved his life. She examined her reflection. But his fascination persists, despite my best efforts to engage him with wedding plans. Emily focused on the ribbons. I'm sure His Highness is merely being kind, Your Grace. Alexander isn't kind, Catherine said flatly. He's dutiful, intelligent, occasionally charming, but rarely kind without purpose. She turned to face Emily directly. Which makes me wonder what purpose you serve. I'm simply a gardener, Your Grace. No, Catherine's voice hardened. You're something else entirely. Lady Elizabeth sees it too. Something familiar about you that doesn't belong on a flower cellar. She rose gracefully. I've learned that Colonel Harrison spoke with you privately. What about, I wonder? Emily's hand trembled slightly with the iron. The Colonel wanted information about the garden preparations for tonight. Lies don't become you, Miss Miller. Catherine moved closer. Tonight's ball will settle many things. The governor will announce additional territory for my family as a wedding gift. A new era begins for the Williams dynasty, an era that has no place for disruptive elements. The threat in her words was unmistakable. Emily handed over the pressed ribbons with a steady hand. The ribbons are ready, Your Grace. Catherine accepted them with a predatory smile. You may go. I'm sure you have much to prepare for tonight's festivities. As soon as Emily escaped Catherine's chambers, she sought out Thompson, finding him directing gardeners to bring fresh evergreens into the ballroom. We have a problem, she whispered. Catherine knows something's amiss. She mentioned Colonel Harrison speaking to me. Thompson frowned. She's moving faster than anticipated. We need to adjust our plan. What do you mean? The governor will be surrounded all evening. You'll never get a private moment with him. Thompson lowered his voice further. But there's another way. The governor always retires to his study for a few minutes of peace during these events. If you could meet him there, how would I even get into the private wing? Leave that to me. Focus on avoiding Catherine until then. The ball began at sunset. Emily, dressed in the simple black uniform of a serving maid, blended into the background as Boston's elite filled the ballroom. Alexander opened the dancing with Catherine, who looked triumphant in her blue silk and pressed ribbons. Governor Williams watched proudly from his ornate chair, Lady Elizabeth at his side. Emily circulated with a tray of champagne, keeping Eleanor's box hidden beneath her servant's apron. She felt Elizabeth's gaze follow her occasionally, but the lady never approached. Shortly before midnight, Thompson passed by, whispering, "The governor's study. 20 minutes, the door will be unlocked." Emily waited anxiously, counting the minutes. When the time came, she slipped away from the ballroom, navigating the mansion's less traveled corridors toward the private wing. The governor's study door stood slightly ajar, exactly as Thompson had promised. Emily entered cautiously, finding the room empty but warmly lit by a fire. Family portraits adorned the walls, Elizabeth looking regal, Alexander as a young boy, the governor in his prime. No trace of Eleanor existed in this official history. Footsteps approached in the hallway. Emily straightened her shoulders, preparing to face her father for the first time. But it wasn't the governor who entered. It was Catherine. "How predictable," the Duchess said, closing the door behind her. "Mrs. Winters saw you lurking in the corridors and alerted me immediately." Emily backed away, clutching Eleanor's box. "I was delivering a message," to an empty room. Catherine's laugh was cold. "No more lies. Miss Miller, or should I say, Miss Williams." Emily froze. "What did you call me?" Elizabeth suspected from the moment you arrived. Your resemblance to her long-dead sister was too striking to ignore. Catherine moved closer. When she mentioned it to Colonel Harrison, he confirmed her fears. "How much do you know?" "Everything." Catherine's eyes gleamed triumphantly. "That you're Eleanor's daughter with the governor. That you possess documents proving your birthright." She gestured to the box in Emily's hands. Lady Elizabeth was most distressed to learn her husband's bastard had returned to complicate the succession, particularly with Alexander so obviously infatuated. "You can't stop the truth," Emily said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "Can't I?" Catherine produced a small crystal vial from her sleeve. "This was intended for you, but plans change." With a swift motion, Catherine emptied the vial's contents into a glass of wine, sitting on the governor's desk. When he comes for his customary midnight respite, he'll find his devoted future daughter-in-law waiting with a toast to his health. Horror dawned on Emily. You're poisoning him, your own father-in-law. Not fatally, Catherine clarified. Just enough to make him terribly ill, at which point Lady Elizabeth will discover Eleanor's bastard attempting to poison him with this. She produced an identical vial. So convenient you chose tonight to reveal yourself. No one will believe that? Everyone will believe it when they find these journals and documents in your possession? Clear motive for revenge after being abandoned? Catherine smiled. Lady Elizabeth suggested the plan. Quite brilliant, don't you think? Before Emily could respond, the door opened again. Both women turned, expecting the governor. Instead, Alexander stood in the doorway, his expression shifting from confusion to suspicion as he took in the scene. Catherine, Emily, what's happening here? The Duchess recovered first, her face transforming into a mask of concern. Alexander, thank goodness you're here. I caught this servant tampering with your father's wine. But Alexander's gaze had fixed on the open box in Emily's hands, and the miniature portrait of Eleanor visible inside. What is that? He asked quietly, stepping into the room and closing the door. Why do you have a portrait of... He stopped, staring at the image, then at Emily's face. Who are you really? The moment of truth had arrived, but not as Emily had planned, with Catherine watching triumphantly and Alexander waiting for answers. Emily realized she had no choice but to reveal everything, and pray it wouldn't destroy them all. My name is Emily Williams, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. I'm the daughter of Eleanor Williams and Governor George Williams. Alexander's expression remained unreadable as he closed the door firmly behind him. Eleanor Williams. I've never heard that name. Because your mother erased her from this family's history, Emily replied. Gaining confidence, Eleanor was Elizabeth's twin sister, separated at birth because of a prophecy that twins in the Williams line would divide the colony in blood and fire. Catherine laughed dismissively. What an absurd tale, Alexander. Clearly this girl is delusional. Let her speak, Alexander commanded, his tone silencing Catherine instantly. He nodded at Emily. Continue. Emily carefully opened Eleanor's box, revealing the documents inside. Eleanor came to Williams' mansion disguised as a lady's maid to know the sister she'd been separated from. She and your father fell in love, and I was born in 1750. Catherine's composure slipped. Alexander, surely you don't believe... The poisoned wine, Catherine, Alexander interrupted sharply. Were you going to mention that? Catherine paled. I don't know what you mean. I overheard you from the hallway, every word. His eyes hardened. Including your plan to frame Emily for poisoning my father. It was Elizabeth's idea, Catherine blurted. Immediately realizing her mistake, Alexander's expression darkened further. So you admit it. Emily watched the confrontation, her mind racing. She hadn't expected Alexander to defend her against Catherine, especially given what she was claiming about his family. There's more, Emily said, drawing both their attention. Something that affects you directly, Alexander. The door opened again, interrupting her revelation. Thompson entered, followed by Governor Williams himself. Father, Alexander began. I know why we're gathered here. The governor interrupted, his authoritative voice filling the room. Thompson has explained everything. All eyes turned to the old gardener, who stood straight, despite his years. I've served the Williams family for 5 decades, Thompson said. I've kept their secrets, tended their gardens, and watched their children grow. But some secrets should not be kept forever. The governor moved to his desk, carefully avoiding the wine glass that Catherine had tampered with. Is it true? He asked Emily directly. Are you Eleanor's daughter? Emily met his gaze, the same gray eyes she saw in her own reflection. Yes, sir. Show me the proof. With trembling hands, Emily presented Eleanor's box. The governor examined each item methodically. The journals, the letters, and finally, the birth document bearing his own seal. His expression softened as he studied the miniature portrait of Eleanor. I remember the day this was painted, he murmured. She hated sitting still for so long. He looked up at Emily, studying her features. You have her eyes and her courage. I suspect, Catherine made a desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Governor Williams, regardless of this girl's parentage, she was planning to poison me, he finished sharply. I heard you and my wife plotting this scheme yesterday evening, Duchess. Did you think my study was unoccupied when you discussed framing my daughter? The color drained from Catherine's face. Your daughter? Yes, the governor's voice was firm. I always suspected Eleanor had given birth before she disappeared. Elizabeth claimed the child died, and in my grief for Eleanor, I never questioned it. He turned to Emily. I never knew she sent you away to protect you. From Elizabeth, Emily said quietly. She discovered Eleanor's identity and ordered her child, me, eliminated. The governor closed his eyes briefly, absorbing this painful truth. So much makes sense now. Elizabeth's sudden coldness toward Eleanor, her insistence that the garden pavilion be locked after Eleanor's departure. He regarded Thompson. You knew all along. I helped Eleanor send the child to safety, Thompson admitted. I promised to watch for her return. Alexander, who had been listening intently, finally spoke. If this is true, then Emily is... He hesitated, looking at her with new understanding. Your half-sister, the governor confirmed. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Emily glanced at Alexander, seeing confusion and what looked like disappointment cross his face. She knew she needed to reveal the final truth. There's something else everyone should know, she began, but was interrupted by commotion in the hallway. The study door burst open to reveal Elizabeth, her face contorted with fury. You treacherous gardener! She hissed at Thompson. You promised you'd keep her away from George. Behind her stood Colonel Harrison, his expression grave. The governor straightened, authority returning to his bearing. Is it true, Elizabeth? Did you order Eleanor's child killed? Elizabeth's composure slipped momentarily before her aristocratic training reasserted itself. Eleanor was trying to destroy our family. That child was an abomination, the product of my love for your sister, the governor finished. A love you knew about but could never accept. You were married to me. Elizabeth's controlled facade cracked. She was my twin. A twin you never acknowledged, Thompson interjected. A sister you allowed to be sent away because of a superstitious prophecy. Elizabeth turned her venom on Thompson. The prophecy that's coming true before our eyes. Look at what this girl has done already. Turned my husband against me, enchanted my son, undermined Catherine's position. Mother, Alexander said quietly. Emily has done nothing but seek the truth of her heritage, a truth you tried to erase. Catherine, seeing her alliance with Elizabeth crumbling, made one last attempt to salvage her position. Alexander, think of our wedding, the political alliance, your duty to... Duty, Alexander echoed. Is it duty to marry a woman who would poison my father and frame an innocent for the crime? Catherine fell silent. Recognizing defeat in his tone, Colonel Harrison stepped forward. Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately. The ball continues, and rumors spread quickly. The governor nodded. James is right, Elizabeth. Catherine, remain here. Alexander, Emily, Thompson. We'll speak in the North Library as they moved to leave. Elizabeth made a final desperate move. She grabbed the poisoned wine glass, lunging at Emily. You'll not take my place. You little... Thompson moved with surprising speed for his age, deflecting Elizabeth's arm. The poisoned wine splashed across her elaborate gown, and to everyone's horror, some of it splashed into her mouth as she gasped. Elizabeth! The governor rushed to her side as she collapsed, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Get the physician! Alexander commanded, and Harrison raced from the room. In the chaos that followed, Emily helped the governor lower Elizabeth to the sofa. Despite everything the woman had done, Emily couldn't wish this fate upon her. It was meant for you, Elizabeth whispered to Emily, her voice already weakening. Just like your mother. Emily froze. What did you say? Eleanor didn't die of fever, Elizabeth confessed, her inhibitions loosened by the poison and approaching death. I couldn't let her reveal the truth about what? The governor demanded, still holding his wife's hand despite her confession. Elizabeth's gaze moved to Alexander, then to Colonel Harrison, who had returned with the physician. About the boy, her eyes fixed on Emily with surprising clarity. He isn't. George's son. The room fell deadly silent as Elizabeth's words registered. Alexander stared at his mother in shock. "What are you saying?" he demanded. "You're not a Williams. By blood." Elizabeth gasped as the physician pushed through to attend her. "James, tell him." All eyes turned to Colonel Harrison, whose military posture had given way to an expression of profound regret. "Is it true?" Alexander asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Am I not the governor's son?" Harrison straightened, accepting the moment of reckoning. "You are my son, Alexander, born of a brief affection between Elizabeth and myself during a time when George was consumed by his love for Eleanor." The governor showed no surprise at this revelation, only sadness. "I suspected as much when you were born, but I chose to accept you as my own. Your mother's indiscretion seemed fair exchange for my love of Eleanor." The physician looked up gravely. "The poison works quickly. She has minutes at most." Elizabeth's breathing grew more labored. "The prophecy," she whispered. "Twins in the Williams line, dividing the colony." Her gaze fixed on Emily. "You are the division." "No, mother," Alexander said firmly, kneeling beside her. "Emily is the healing, don't you see? She's the daughter of one twin. I'm the son of the other. We don't divide the colony. We unite the legacy of both sisters." As understanding dawned in Elizabeth's fading eyes, Emily realized Alexander was right. The prophecy had been misinterpreted for decades. The twins wouldn't destroy the Williams legacy. Their descendants would preserve it by coming together. With a final breath, Elizabeth slipped away. Her secrets finally revealed and her misguided protections rendered meaningless. The governor stood slowly, the weight of decades of deception evident in his stance. "It seems we all have much to discuss," he said quietly, "and a legacy to redefine." 1 year later, the south garden of Williams' mansion bloomed with unprecedented beauty. White roses intertwined with blue forget-me-nots, symbolizing the union being celebrated that day. Emily stood at her bedroom window, watching servants make final preparations for the ceremony. No longer housed in the servants' quarters, she now occupied a suite befitting her status as the governor's recognized daughter. The past year had transformed everything, following Elizabeth's shocking death and Catherine's hasty departure from Boston in disgrace. The colony had buzzed with rumors. Governor Williams had silenced them by officially acknowledging Emily as his daughter. Presenting the legal documents that Eleanor had preserved, Colonel Harrison, freed from decades of secrecy, had stepped forward to publicly acknowledge his paternity of Alexander, rather than weakening the Williams legacy. This honesty had strengthened it, demonstrating the governor's commitment to truth over appearances. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked, entering with Emily's wedding gown, a creation of ivory silk embroidered with subtle patterns inspired by the garden pavilion where she was born. "I'm not sure anyone can be ready for this," Emily replied, turning from the window. Sarah laughed as she helped Emily dress. From flower seller to the governor's daughter to Alexander's bride, all in less than 2 years. "It's like something from a storybook. A very complicated storybook," Emily amended. The revelation that Alexander was not actually a Williams by blood had freed them to acknowledge their growing feelings without the shadow of consanguinity. Though some whispered about the propriety of their union, the governor had embraced the match wholeheartedly, seeing in it the fulfillment of hopes he had once cherished with Eleanor. A knock at the door announced Martha Jenkins, her weathered face creased in a rare smile. "The bride needs her something old," the old healer announced, presenting a small wooden box. Inside lay a delicate bracelet of silver and pearls. Eleanor wore this on her 18th birthday, before she came seeking her sister. "I've kept it safe all these years." Emily's eyes welled with tears as Martha fastened it around her wrist. "Thank you for everything. Martha, without you, I might never have learned the truth. Truth finds its way to the surface, like seedlings pushing through soil," Martha replied. "I merely helped clear the path a little." Thompson arrived next, looking distinguished in formal attire that contrasted sharply with his usual gardening clothes. "The garden is ready," he announced proudly, "and I have something for you." From his pocket, he produced a key, the same tarnished key that had first unlocked the pavilion and her past. "The governor thought you might want this." Emily accepted it with a trembling hand. "The pavilion has been restored," Thompson finished. "Not as a hidden sanctuary anymore. but as the heart of the new school for children from all backgrounds. Transforming the South Garden into an educational center had been Emily's first initiative after her legitimization, drawing on her own experience of learning to read by watching through windows. She had proposed a school where children of all social classes could receive education previously reserved for the elite. The governor had not only approved but expanded the project, donating adjacent land and establishing a trust to ensure its continuation beyond his lifetime. "It's time," Sarah announced. Arranging Emily's veil carefully, the small procession made its way through the mansion's corridors, which no longer felt alien or intimidating to Emily. Servants and guests alike smiled and nodded as she passed, the household having gradually accepted her as part of the Williams family. In the garden, guests had assembled beneath a canopy of flowering trees. Unlike traditional colonial weddings restricted to the elite, Emily and Alexander had insisted on inviting people from all walks of Boston life: merchants who had purchased Emily's flowers, servants who had shown her kindness, and even children from the new school. The governor waited at the garden entrance to escort her. Since Elizabeth's death, he had aged visibly, but today his eyes shone with pride and something like peace. "You look so much like her," he said quietly, as Emily took his arm. "She would be proud of what you've accomplished." "Do you think she would approve?" Emily asked, glancing toward the assembled guests where Colonel Harrison stood near Alexander, both men resplendent in formal attire. Of all of this, Eleanor always believed in love over convention, the governor replied. She would have delighted in seeing her daughter and Elizabeth's son united, healing the rift between sisters that began before either of you were born, as they proceeded down the flower-lined aisle. Emily caught Alexander's gaze, no longer the arrogant prince she had rescued in the woods, nor the confused man discovering his true parentage in that fateful study. He had emerged as a leader determined to forge his own path. Though not a Williams by blood, Alexander had retained his position in the governor's succession plans, not as the automatic heir, but as a partner with Emily in a new vision for the colony's governance. Together, they represented both aristocratic tradition and connection to the common people. The ceremony blended elements of high society ritual with simpler traditions from Boston's working community. When the minister asked who supported this union, the governor and Colonel Harrison spoke in unison. Former rivals united in blessing their children's happiness. "The bride and groom have prepared their own vows," the minister announced, stepping aside. Alexander took Emily's hands, his voice carrying clearly across the garden. "When a flower seller saved a prince in a storm, I could never have imagined where that meeting would lead. You showed me that nobility exists in actions, not titles. A lesson I needed desperately." His eyes held hers steadily. "I pledge to honor that lesson daily, to lead alongside you rather than above you, and to love you with a heart that recognizes its tremendous fortune in finding you." Emily's response came from a place of profound certainty. "I spent my life searching for belonging, carrying a medallion whose meaning I couldn't understand, and dreaming of a garden I couldn't place. In finding my past, I discovered my future." She smiled. "I pledge to walk with you between worlds, to bring understanding where there has been division, to create a legacy of compassion rather than privilege, and to love you with the freedom that truth has given us." As they exchanged rings, Thompson and Martha exchanged knowing glances. The ancient prophecy about twins dividing the colony had been transformed through their descendants, not into blood and fire, but into a union that bridged seemingly irreconcilable worlds. At the celebration that followed, the governor announced the establishment of the Eleanor Williams Foundation, dedicated to education and opportunity for all colonial children regardless of birth. It would be jointly administered by Alexander and Emily, with Colonel Harrison and Thompson serving as advisors. "The true test of nobility," the governor declared to the assembled guests, "is not the circumstances of one's birth, but the legacy one creates through action and character." As twilight fell over the celebration, Emily slipped away briefly to the garden pavilion, standing in the quiet space where her life had begun. She opened her medallion with the method Martha had taught her, revealing its hidden compartment. Inside lay a tiny fragment of cloth, a piece of the christening gown that twin sisters had once shared. "I thought I might find you here," Alexander said, entering the pavilion. "Just making peace with the past," Emily replied. Closing the medallion, Alexander took her hand, leading her back toward the celebration where their future awaited. The prophecy spoke of division, but failed to foresee what would follow. That division would ultimately lead to a stronger union. As they rejoined their guests, Emily realized that her mother's journey had not ended in tragedy, but had come full circle through her daughter. Eleanor had been separated from her sister by fear of a prophecy, yet their children had united to create something stronger than the division that came before. In the garden where she had once played as a hidden child, Emily now stood proudly as herself, neither common nor royal, but something altogether new. The flower seller who had saved a prince had found not just her identity, but a purpose that would transform the colony far beyond what any prophecy could have foretold.